problem with most people is that they don't believe something can happen until it already has. It's not stupidity or weakness, it's just human nature.
President Obama turned his attention to the hot-button issue of immigration yesterday, saying the time for reform is now, and it must not be delayed until after the 2012 election.
Think back to that cobweb-shrouded period in our history. It was January of 2019. The federal government had just shut down. The president said we needed a border wall. The Democrats scoffed at him. They claimed the entire immigration crisis was, quote, manufactured.
The system's still broken.
His solution for the illegal immigration crisis on the Mexican border.
President Obama and Texas Republican Governor Rick Perry squared off over how to stop the flow of unaccompanied minors from Central America into Texas. Perry urged the president to go see the situation in the Rio Grande Valley for himself and told us this is a crisis of the president's own making.
And President Obama said with Congress out on recess, he may act alone to allocate resources to deal with the border crisis.
In case you can't remember whose side the media took, here's a clip from our archives.
Folks, the president has manufactured one heck of a political crisis for himself.
Donald Trump is manufacturing a national security crisis. You will hear them say is that this is a manufactured crisis. It's not a national security crisis.
From Nancy Pelosi down to Debbie Wasserman Schultz or anybody else who will give him a dime for this project.
Because it's manufactured.
It's a manufactured crisis for the president to get a political win.
We have a president who will go on TV tonight and lie and lie and lie some more. This is a manufactured crisis.
This isn't theater. This is a problem. I'm not interested in photo ops. I'm interested in solving a problem.
All together now, manufactured crisis. 6 syllables. Learn them, dear robots. Repeat them until they seem plausible. Move on. They'll never remember you lied.
Mr. Obama said that his administration has answered the complaints of Republicans about border security, with more agents, a border fence, and aerial surveillance, going above and beyond what they asked for.
New York Times leads story, border at breaking point. And they talk about the broken records of families coming across. It's a real crisis, don't you agree?
I think that what you have is what we've been calling a humanitarian crisis, if that's what you're talking about. It's not about an invading army. What we have is over half of this 76,000 in the last few months is 40,000 families and an additional 7,250 kids. So it's like 2/3 of this is families, and they're largely not from Mexico, by the way, right. El Salvador, Guatemala, Honduras.
Yep.
And when they come, they're not like running in and running somewhere and joining again. They're specifically saying we're seeking asylum because we're fleeing violence, poverty, and hunger. So that's a different dynamic than the one described, of course, in the middle of the midterms or even now in the call for
Okay,
emergency.
but you admit that there's a humanitarian crisis at the border.
Oh, yeah. I don't think you can.
And that's exactly what they did. It's what they always do. But reality has an unpleasant habit of reinserting itself into these things. You can dismiss a crisis as manufactured, but that doesn't mean the crisis doesn't exist. In the last month, 76,000 illegal aliens crossed the U.S.-Mexico border. That's the highest number in more than a decade. That's more than the entire population of San Francisco or Boston or Washington, D.C. every single year, coming by foot over just one of our international borders. That is a crisis, manufactured or not.
I know there's a lot of talk right now about border security, so let me repeat. Today, illegal crossings are near their lowest level in decades, and if passed, the Senate bill, as currently written and is hitting the floor, would put in place the toughest border enforcement plan that America has ever seen.
We face a crisis, a real, serious, and sustained crisis at our borders. We have tens of thousands of illegal aliens arriving at our doorstep every month. We have drugs, criminals, and violence spilling into our country every week. Illegal immigration is simply spiraling out of control. This is an 80% increase over the same time last year. And I report today that CBP is forecasting the problem will get even worse this spring as the weather warms up.
President Obama dismissed calls to visit the border during his fundraising swing through Dallas and Austin.
There's nothing that is taking place down there that I am not intimately aware of and briefed on.
As I recall, President Bush got chastised greatly for not showing up in New Orleans when Katrina occurred.
Do you believe this is on the magnitude of that?
The parallel for me is that when we know a hurricane is coming, we put things into place so that we can deal with it.
Could be getting worse? Well, we could be looking, yes, at nearly 1 million illegals crossing our borders if the trends continue. If these numbers hold, every 4 months, we'll import the equivalent of the population of Richmond, Virginia, or Baton Rouge, Louisiana, into the United States. And this isn't a national emergency? Let's face it, most Democrats know this is a crisis.
It will build on what we've done and continue to strengthen our borders. It will make sure that businesses and workers are all playing by the same set of rules. And it includes tough penalties for those who don't. And it's fair for those who try to immigrate legally by stopping those who try to skip the line. It's the right thing to do.
The sheer volume of crossers is overwhelming our facilities. And liberals then blame Trump?
For his part, the president said he doesn't need a photo op or political criticism about lax border security.
How are the people in charge responding to this crisis? Well, they're still lying. And not just lying, because that's never enough for them. They're lying and sneering at the same time, all with maximum self-righteousness. They're selling us a steaming load of BS and screaming at us for not believing it.
But this is a bill that's largely consistent with the principles that I and the people on this stage have laid out for common sense reform. First of all, if passed, this bill would be the biggest commitment to border security in our nation's history. It would put another $6.5 billion on top of what we're already spending towards stronger, smarter security along our borders.
The president should not be asking for more money to an agency that has systematically violated human rights. The president should be really defending why we are funding such an agency at all. Those women and children trying to come here with nothing but the shirts on their back to create an opportunity and to provide for this nation are acting more in an American tradition than this president is right now.
Yeah. They're the real Americans. Well, Ocasio-Cortez expanded on this on Twitter last night. She denounced any Democrat who might be tempted to compromise in any way on immigration. Only open borders are morally acceptable.
Now, this bill isn't perfect. It's a compromise. And going forward, nobody's going to get everything that they want. Not Democrats, not Republicans, not me.
Quote, where was the concern last week when 26 Democrats voted for a GOP amendment to expand ICE powers rooted in the racist plus false trope that Latino immigrants are more dangerous than U.S.-born citizens? Ocasio-Cortez continued this way, quote, the entire premise of a wall is not based in fact. It's based in a racist plus non-evidence-based trope that immigrants are dangerous. Yet some Dems are willing to compromise and spend billions on a trope because we've accepted some kind of racism as realpolitik in America, end quote.
It would increase criminal penalties against smugglers and traffickers. It would finally give every employer a reliable way to check that every person they're hiring is here legally.
I think the thing is, we should all be able to agree that it's a humanitarian crisis that needs to be dealt with, right? Okay, so the Democrats don't like the wall idea. They think that's a bad one. Okay, so then what else are you suggesting to help stop the flow?
Right.
And I don't see any of that.
Right.
I don't see anything that they're suggesting that would actually stop it.
Maybe they'll need a moat. Maybe they want alligators in the moat. They'll never be satisfied. And I understand that's politics.
Perry warned the border situation could spin out of control and evoked memories of federal mismanagement after Hurricane Katrina.
But I think there are suggestions about increasing space for detention, the judges to get this done, even arguments about whether or not we change the law.
And while we're creating these grand new plans to hold illegal immigrants accountable and track them, let's not forget who's footing the bill here. Guess what the cost is? $82,000 per year per illegal immigrant in the United States. And then, of course, the children they have, and then the children are citizens, and then no one's deported.
It's fair for middle-class families by making sure that those who are brought into the system pay their fair share in taxes and for service.
Democrats prefer to focus, though, on non-citizens. their treatment, their medical care, and of course their race.
I have told this administration, and others have told this administration for years, that this was exactly what was going to happen.
You wanted to separate children and families, and you wanted to do it with compassion? You have no feeling, no compassion, no empathy here.
The president also told parents in Central America to stop sending their children to the United States with the false hope they will be allowed to stay.
This is an incredibly dangerous situation, and it is unlikely that their children will be able to stay.
This is about color. We've opened our doors. You're tired, you're poor. Huddled masses yearning to breathe free. Accept. We now have our quota of people of color.
And I've asked parents across Central America not to put their children in harm's way in this fashion.
It gets very dramatic when you whisper. Girls are being abused, raped, and in some cases trafficked as part of these caravans, and it is despicable what is happening to these young people. Congress needs to get its head out of the sand and stop this madness once and for all. If someone crosses the border illegally, with rare exception, they should be turned back immediately. Family units or people posing as family units would not make this dangerous trek once word spread in their home country. Congress should pass this law.
And to truly deal with this issue, Congress needs to act. And that moment is now.
If you want to apply for asylum, that's fine, but you should do so in the safety of your home country, or, as is beginning to happen now, once you're in the United States and you declare, you should be sent to Mexico until your case comes up for hearing. We have a backlog right now of 800,000 immigration cases.
That's a reference to a letter Perry sent the president in May of 2012 alerting the administration to 5,200 unaccompanied minors in Texas from Guatemala, El Salvador, and Honduras. The number of children from those three countries now being detained in Texas is 57,000.
So nobody's taking border enforcement lightly.
Racist! White supremacist! Anyone who disagrees with me is a Nazi. How tired are you of screeching like this? How boring has it become?
So if somebody new takes over and says exactly what Trump's saying, they'll be behind it.